My name is Hilary Foster, and for most of my life, I believed family was the one place where you never had to prove you belonged. I was wrong. I learned that lesson on a freezing Christmas night when my own parents locked me and my grandfather outside their house. But before I tell you about that night, you need to understand something about my grandfather. His name was Walter Foster. To the rest of the world, he was an old man in a wheelchair who needed help getting through the day. His hands shook when he lifted a cup of coffee. His legs had stopped carrying him years earlier after an accident at the factory where he worked. But to me, Grandpa Walter was the strongest person I knew. He taught me how to cook when I was 8 years old. Food is not just something you put on a plate, he used to say while standing beside me in the kitchen. It's a way of telling people they matter. I remembered those words every day, especially when nobody else did. I became a chef because of him. While other kids were outside playing, I was standing on a chair beside him, learning how to make soup, bake bread, and turn simple ingredients into something that could make a person smile. My parents never understood my bond with him. My mother, Diane, always said Grandpa was too much responsibility. My father, Richard, was worse. He's old, Hilary, he would say. People like him belong in care homes, not at family dinners. Every time he said that, something inside me hurt. Because Grandpa wasn't a burden. He was the reason I became the person I was. The reason I knew kindness mattered. The reason I still believed people could be good. Christmas was supposed to be different. At least, that's what I thought. I had spent the entire week preparing food for my family. I made roasted turkey, homemade bread, mashed potatoes, and Grandpa's favorite apple pie. I even made a special dessert because I knew he loved cinnamon. When I arrived at my parents' house with Grandpa beside me, the windows were glowing warmly. Snow covered the driveway. The smell of holiday candles filled the air. For a moment, I thought everything was going to be okay. My father opened the door. His smile disappeared the second he saw Grandpa's wheelchair. "You brought him." I looked at him, confused. "Dad, of course I brought him. He's family." My mother appeared behind him. Her face immediately became cold. "Hilary, we talked about this." "No, Mom. You told me you didn't want him here. I told you I wasn't leaving him alone on Christmas." My father stepped outside. "Always making everything difficult," he said. Grandpa lowered his eyes. I hated seeing him like that. He had spent his whole life helping others, and now he was being treated like an inconvenience. "Richard," Grandpa said quietly, "if my presence causes problems, I can go." I immediately grabbed his hand. "No, you're staying." My father laughed bitterly. "This is exactly the problem with you, Hilary. You always choose him." I stared at him. "He needs someone. And what about us?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You have never needed me the way he does." That sentence changed everything. My father's face turned red. My mother stepped forward. "You're being disrespectful in our home." "Our home," I repeated. Dad just insulted Grandpa at the door. Then my father did something I never expected. He reached out and grabbed Grandpa's wheelchair. "Enough." My heart stopped. "Dad, don't touch him." But he pushed the chair backward. Not hard enough to hurt him, but hard enough to show me he didn't care. Grandpa's face filled with sadness. Not anger, not hatred, just sadness. That hurt more than anything. I stepped between them. "If you can't respect him, we'll leave." My mother crossed her arms. "Maybe that's best." I waited. I thought she would stop me. I thought my father would apologize. I thought someone would remember we were family. Nobody did. My father went inside. My mother followed. And then I heard the door lock. The sound echoed through the cold night. I stood there in shock. My grandfather looked at me. "Hilary." His voice was weak. I turned around. The lights from the house shined through the windows. Inside, my family was celebrating Christmas. Without us, I felt tears filling my eyes. "Are you cold, Grandpa?" He smiled faintly, only a little. I knew he was lying. The temperature was dropping. Snow was falling harder, and my grandfather was sitting outside in his wheelchair because the people who were supposed to love him decided he was not worth a seat at the table. I called my mother. No answer. I called my father. No answer. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. I opened it. "Maybe this will teach you to stop choosing him over your own family." I stared at those words. For years, I had tried to earn their approval. I had worked harder. I had forgiven more. I had stayed quiet. But standing there in the snow, looking at my grandfather, I finally understood something. Some people don't reject you because you failed. They reject you because your kindness reminds them of what they lack. I took off my coat and placed it around Grandpa's shoulders. "Come on," I whispered. "Where are we going?" he asked. I looked back at the house. The place I grew up. The place I thought would always be home. Somewhere we're wanted. I pushed his wheelchair down the driveway. Neither of us knew what would happen next. We didn't know that 1 week later, everything would change. We didn't know that my grandfather had a secret. A secret my parents would discover only after it was too late. A secret hidden inside a will. And when that document was finally opened, everyone would learn who the real family was. That night, I drove through the snow with one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding Grandpa's hand. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I couldn't let him sit outside another minute. My old apartment was too small. The heating system barely worked, and there was no space for a wheelchair. But it was still better than the house we had just left. Because a small, cold apartment filled with love was better than a huge house filled with cruelty. When we arrived, Grandpa looked around. The living room was tiny. The couch was old. The kitchen had barely enough space for one person. He smiled. "This is a beautiful place." I laughed softly. "Grandpa, you don't have to pretend." "I'm not pretending." He looked at me. "Your mother and father have a big house, but this place feels like home." That sentence broke something inside me. Because I knew he was right. I helped him get comfortable and made some hot tea. For the first time all night, there was silence. Not the painful silence from my parents' house. A peaceful one, but my mind kept going back. The locked door, my mother's message, my father's cold expression. How did they become like this? I whispered. Grandpa looked at me. Some people spend so much time chasing comfort that they forget compassion. I sat beside him. Did you always know they were like this? He was quiet. Too quiet. Then he said something that surprised me. Yes. I looked at him. What do you mean? He looked toward the window where snow covered the streets. I noticed things long before you did. Like what? He sighed. Your parents didn't want me around after my accident. They thought I had nothing left to offer. My heart tightened. Grandpa, but I watched you. He smiled. You were the only one who never saw my wheelchair. You saw me. I looked down. Tears formed in my eyes. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. He reached for my hand. Hilary, you did more than anyone. I wanted to believe him. But there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Why would my parents choose this? Why would they throw away their own family? I thought I knew the answer. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up early and started making breakfast. Old habits. When life became difficult, I cooked. I made Grandpa eggs, toast, and coffee. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part of me hoped she was calling to apologize. I answered. Hello. Her voice was cold. Hilary, you need to bring Grandpa's things back. I froze. What? His belongings. His clothes, his papers, everything. I couldn't believe it. Mom, you locked us outside on Christmas. And you made a scene. I closed my eyes. A scene. That was what she called it. Mom, Grandpa is your father. There was a long pause. Then she said, you don't understand. He isn't who you think he is. I felt confused. What does that mean? You'll find out. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at the phone. Grandpa noticed. What happened? I looked at him. Mom said you're not who I think you are. For the first time, Grandpa looked nervous. Not angry, not surprised, nervous. And that scared me. Grandpa, he didn't answer. Walter, he took a slow breath. There are things I should have told you. My heart started beating faster. What things? He looked at me. About my past. I waited. The man who taught me everything suddenly looked like a stranger. Then he said, before I became disabled, before I lived quietly, I owned several businesses. I blinked. What? He gave a small smile. I wasn't always the old man you see today. I sat down. Grandpa, what are you talking about? I built a company from nothing. I stared at him. You never told me. I wanted a simple life. Why? Because money changes people. The room became silent. Then he continued. After your grandmother passed away, I decided to step away from everything. I gave your parents chances. I helped them start their lives. I felt my stomach tighten. Wait, help them? Yes. How much? He looked away. Enough that they never had to struggle. Everything suddenly made sense. The expensive house, the lifestyle, the confidence. My parents didn't build everything alone. Grandpa had given them the foundation. And they still treated him like he was nothing. But then he said something even more shocking. There is a reason they were afraid of me. I looked at him. Afraid. He nodded. Before Christmas, I changed my will. The room went completely silent. What did you change? He looked at me with tired eyes. I removed them. I couldn't speak. My parents had spent years enjoying everything my grandfather gave them. And now, they had lost it. But why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know something. What? Who loved me when there was nothing to gain? My eyes filled with tears. And you found out. He nodded. Yes. A week later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was a lawyer. Miss Foster. Yes. My name is Daniel Miller. I represent your grandfather. My hands went cold. How can I help you? There has been a change regarding Mr. Walter Foster's estate. I looked at Grandpa. He already knew. The lawyer continued. We need you both to attend the official reading of his will. I swallowed. When? Tomorrow morning. After the call ended, I looked at Grandpa. What happens now? He smiled. Now, everyone learns the truth. The next morning, I walked into the same house that had thrown us out. But this time, I wasn't walking in as someone begging to belong. I was walking in beside the man they underestimated. And everyone sitting at that table was about to discover that the quietest person in the room had the biggest power. I never thought I would walk back into my parents' house again. Not after Christmas night. Not after seeing my grandfather sitting outside in the snow while the people inside celebrated without us. But there I was. The same front door. The same hallway. The same family photos hanging on the walls. Only this time, everything felt different. Because I wasn't there to ask for acceptance. I was there for the truth. My grandfather sat beside me in his wheelchair. His hands rested calmly on the armrests. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. I looked at him. Are you nervous? He smiled. No. How? He looked at the house. Because I already lost what mattered most to me. What? He looked at me. My family's love. I didn't know what to say. Before I could answer, the door opened. My mother stood there. The moment she saw Grandpa, her expression changed. Not sadness. Not regret. Fear, come in, she said quietly. We entered the living room. My father was already there. He didn't look at us. My younger brother, Kevin, was sitting on the couch, looking uncomfortable. I hadn't seen him since Christmas. He avoided my eyes. I understood. Everyone knew what happened. Everyone knew they had crossed a line. But nobody wanted to admit it. A man in a dark suit stood near the fireplace. Mr. Foster. Grandpa nodded. The man stepped forward. I'm Daniel Miller. I've handled your legal affairs for many years. My father suddenly spoke. Let's just get this over with. Daniel looked at him. Of course, Richard. The room became quiet. Daniel opened a folder. Before I read the will, Mr. Foster wanted everyone present to hear a few words. He looked at Grandpa. Grandpa took a breath. Then he spoke. I spent my life believing that family was built on blood. My parents listened. But as I grew older, I learned something. He looked at me. Family is built on choices. My mother looked down. Grandpa continued. On Christmas night, I learned the truth. My father shifted in his chair. Dad, we already talked about this. Grandpa looked at him. No, Richard, you talked. I listened. That sentence made the room uncomfortable. I had never heard Grandpa speak with anger before. But there was something stronger than anger in his voice. Disappointment. I never expected my children to be perfect, he said. I never expected them to repay everything I gave them. My father's face tightened, but I expected them to show kindness to a helpless old man. Nobody spoke. Daniel opened the folder. The official will of Walter Foster. My mother's fingers tightened around her purse. Daniel began reading. I, Walter James Foster, leave my entire estate under the following conditions. Everyone leaned forward. My father looked confident. My mother looked nervous. First, my properties, investments, and remaining assets will not be given to Richard Foster or Diane Foster. The room froze. My father stood up. What? Daniel continued. Because both have demonstrated that they value comfort over compassion, they will receive no inheritance. My father's face turned red. This is ridiculous. Daniel ignored him. However, there is a second part. Everyone became silent. I leave my estate to Hilary Foster. My heart stopped. I looked at Grandpa. What? My father stared at me. My mother looked shocked. No, she whispered. Daniel continued. Hilary is to receive ownership of all assets, with one condition. I felt nervous. What condition? Daniel looked at the paper. Her responsibility is to use these resources to help people who are forgotten, ignored, or treated as burdens. I looked at Grandpa. He smiled. That was always your gift, Hilary. My eyes filled with tears. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the houses or businesses. The only thing I felt was that Grandpa had finally been seen. But my father wasn't finished. He stepped forward. You're giving everything to her. After everything I did. Grandpa looked at him. Everything you did. My father went silent. Yes, Grandpa said. I gave you opportunities. I helped you build your life. But you confused receiving help with earning respect. My father had no answer. Then my mother spoke. You're choosing her over your own children. Grandpa looked at her. No. His voice was calm. I'm choosing the person who acted like family. Those words hurt them more than any punishment could. Because they were true. My brother Kevin suddenly stood up. Grandpa. Everyone looked at him. He looked ashamed. I should have stopped them. The room went quiet. I saw what happened on Christmas. I knew it was wrong. He looked at me, and I said nothing. I didn't know how to respond. Because he wasn't innocent. But at least he admitted it. Grandpa nodded. Taking responsibility is the first step toward becoming better. Daniel closed the folder. The reading is complete. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. As we were leaving, my mother followed us. Hilary. I stopped. For the first time in years, her voice sounded different. Not angry. Broken. I didn't know. I turned around. Didn't know what. That he would do this. I stared at her. That's what you regret. She looked away. I thought he was just an old man who needed help. I felt a sadness I couldn't explain. Because she finally understood. Too late. You weren't supposed to love him because of what he had, I said. You were supposed to love him because he was your father. She had no response. I walked away. Outside, the cold air hit my face. But this time, I wasn't standing there helpless. I was free. Grandpa looked at me. Are you okay? I smiled. For the first time in a long time. He nodded. Good. As we drove away, I thought the story was over. But I didn't know the hardest part was still coming. Because money changes people, and when my parents realized they had lost everything, they weren't ready to let go. Not yet. After the reading of Grandpa's will, I thought the worst was behind us. I believed that once the truth was revealed, people would finally understand. I was wrong. Some people don't change when they lose something. They only reveal who they really are. For the first few days, life felt strangely peaceful. Grandpa moved into my apartment permanently. It wasn't large. It wasn't fancy. But every morning, I woke up and heard him humming old songs from the kitchen. Every evening, we ate dinner together. And for the first time in years, I saw him truly happy. Not pretending. Not hiding his pain. Happy. I started visiting the businesses Grandpa left me. I expected to find empty buildings and old paperwork. Instead, I discovered something incredible. Grandpa had built a company that helped people. There were programs for workers, scholarships for young cooks, food assistance for families who were struggling. I stood in his office, looking through old documents. Grandpa, I said when I got home, why didn't you tell me any of this? He smiled. Because I didn't want you to love me because of my name. I shook my head. I could never. I know. He looked at me. That's why you were the right person. But my happiness didn't last. One morning, I received a call from an unknown number. Hello. A man answered. Miss Foster, I'm calling about your father. My heart sank. What happened? He wants to meet. I was silent. Why? The man hesitated. He says he needs to apologize. I looked at Grandpa. He was reading a book by the window. A part of me wanted to refuse. A part of me wanted to hear the truth. So I agreed. The meeting was at a small cafe. When I arrived, my father was already sitting there. But he looked different. The confidence was gone. The expensive watch. The perfect clothes. The attitude. All gone. He looked tired. Hilary. I sat down. Why did you want to see me? He looked at his hands. I made mistakes. I waited. I was angry. I was proud. He looked up. But I never thought you would actually leave. I almost laughed. You never thought I would leave. No. Dad, you locked the door. He looked down. I know. The silence between us was heavy. Then he said something I didn't expect. I was jealous. I frowned. Of what? Of him. I stared at him. You were jealous of Grandpa. He nodded. Your whole life, you admired him. I couldn't believe it. I admired him because he was good. I know. My father's eyes became wet. And I spent my whole life trying to prove I was better than him. For a moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Regret. Real regret. But regret doesn't erase damage. You hurt him, I said. I know. You hurt me. I know. He took a deep breath. Can you forgive me? I didn't answer immediately. Because forgiveness is complicated. You can forgive someone and still remember what they did. I don't know, I said. He nodded slowly. I understand. Then he reached into his pocket. He placed an envelope on the table. What is this? Something your grandfather wanted you to have. I froze. My grandfather. My father nodded. He gave this to me years ago. Why? Because he knew one day you might need it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was Grandpa's. My hands shook. I started reading. Dear Hilary, if you are reading this, it means life has shown you something difficult. People will disappoint you, even people you love, but don't let their choices change who you are. The world needs kind people, but kindness does not mean allowing others to hurt you. A good heart also needs courage. I want you to remember one thing. Never measure your worth by how others treat you. Some people will fail to see your value. That does not make you less valuable. Love, Grandpa, I couldn't hold back my tears. My father watched silently. He wrote that before Christmas, he said. He knew. I looked at him. He knew things might fall apart. My father nodded. He always understood people better than we did. I folded the letter carefully. When I returned home, Grandpa was waiting. You found it. I looked at him. You knew. He smiled. I hoped you would. I sat beside him. Why did you leave that with Dad? Because I wanted him to face what he had done. I looked at him. Do you forgive him? Grandpa was quiet. Then he said, forgiveness is not forgetting. I nodded. That's true. But hatred is a heavy thing to carry. He looked outside. I don't want to spend my remaining years carrying it. That night, I made a decision. I would not become like my parents. I would not let their cruelty turn me cruel. But there was still one final surprise. A few weeks later, while going through Grandpa's business records, I found something strange. A hidden file. Inside was an old document. And when I read the first page, my hands started shaking. Because it wasn't about money. It wasn't about the company. It was about my family. And the secret Grandpa had kept for decades was about me. I stared at the old document sitting in my hands. For several minutes, I couldn't even turn the page. The file had my name written on it. Hilary Foster. My heart started racing. Why would Grandpa have a file about me? I looked around his office. The room that once belonged to a businessman now felt like a place full of hidden memories. I opened the document. The first page was dated many years ago, before I was old enough to understand anything. It was a legal agreement. A trust. My name was written at the top. I read the words slowly. And then I realized something. Grandpa had been protecting me my entire life. Not just from the world. From my own family. The document explained that when I was born, Grandpa created a separate account for my future. Not because he wanted to give me money, but because he wanted to make sure I had freedom. A chance. A safety net. But there was a condition. I could only receive it when I was old enough and when Grandpa believed I understood the value of kindness. I smiled through my tears. Of course, that was Grandpa. Even his gifts came with lessons. At the bottom of the document was a letter. I opened it. My dear Hilary, if you are reading this, you have already shown me everything I needed to know. You never treated me like an old man. You never treated me like a responsibility. You treated me like a person. That is rare. Many people are kind when they want something. True kindness appears when there is nothing to gain. I watched you, not to judge you, but because I wanted to make sure the world had not changed your heart. It didn't. I am proud of you. I stopped reading. I pressed the letter against my chest. Grandpa didn't believe in revenge. He believed in truth. And somehow, that was stronger. The next morning, I sat with him at breakfast. I found the documents. He looked up. So you know. Yes. I smiled. You trusted me before anyone else did. He nodded. Because I knew you. I reached across the table and held his hand. I don't want to spend my life proving people wrong. You shouldn't. I want to build something. His eyes brightened. What? I looked at him. Something that helps people like you. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you would say. A year later, everything had changed. The old Foster company had a new direction. I created a foundation in Grandpa's name. It helped elderly people who had nobody. People in wheelchairs. People forgotten by their families. People who felt invisible. Because I knew what that felt like. Not long after, I received another letter. From my mother. I almost didn't open it. But I did. She wrote, "Hilary, I don't know if you can forgive me. I spent years believing success meant having more. More money. More comfort. More status. Your grandfather had everything, but he was still humble. I finally understand what I lost. Not the inheritance. Not the house. A father. And a daughter." I read the letter twice. Then I put it away. Because some wounds heal slowly. But they can heal. My relationship with my parents never became what it was before. Maybe that was impossible, but over time, things changed. My father volunteered at the foundation. Not because he wanted attention. Because he wanted to make things right. My mother visited Grandpa. At first, their conversations were awkward. But Grandpa welcomed her, not because she deserved it. Because he refused to let bitterness control him. And my brother Kevin, he became one of the foundation's biggest supporters. One evening, years later, I sat beside Grandpa watching the sunset. He was older, more tired, but still smiling. "Do you remember that Christmas?" I asked. He laughed softly. "The coldest Christmas of my life." I looked at him. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't apologize for the night that showed us the truth." I smiled. "You really believe everything happens for a reason?" He looked at me. "No." I was surprised. He continued. "Sometimes bad things happen because people make bad choices." I nodded. "But we decide what happens after." Those words stayed with me. Because he was right. My parents thought throwing us away would break us. They thought kindness was weakness. They thought an old man in a wheelchair had nothing left to give. But they were wrong. That Christmas night, they didn't throw away a burden. They threw away the person who had built everything they had. And they almost lost the only daughter who still believed in them. My grandfather's will changed everything. But not because of the money. The greatest inheritance he left me wasn't a company. It wasn't a house. It wasn't a fortune. It was a lesson. That your character is revealed when nobody is watching. That love is shown through actions. And that sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the greatest strength. I still keep Grandpa's final letter in my kitchen drawer. Every time I cook, I see it. And I remember the words he taught me as a child. Food tells people they matter. Now I understand. Life works the same way. The way we treat people tells the world who we really are. And my grandfather, he was the richest man I ever knew. Not because of what he owned, but because of what he gave. The end.